Now, you might remember that yesterday we introduced Ron Tesoriero, who'd come over from Sydney to fill in for his friend, Michael Willesee, who for the second year running has not been available to us here. Last year he broke his hip, and this year there's a family crisis that he had to take care of, so Ron came in his place, for which I am extremely grateful. I didn't want him to stop talking about what he was talking about yesterday. And instead of trying to get to sleep, I was thinking about what he had been talking about. Because what Ron was talking about yesterday will, in the not-too-distant future, it could become a defining point in the understanding that people have or refuse to have about what we know to be a fact. So this is a very, very challenging matter. So I think what Ron is proposing to do is to talk to you by way of introduction, and then he's going to show you a video, and I wish he could provide some answers, but of course it depends on our own understanding of these things. But anyway, I am absolutely delighted that he's here. Ron Tesoriero.
Thanks again, Phil, for another flattering introduction. I'm pleased to be able to stand before you today and present a short film that Mike Willesee and I made on the Eucharist. It only runs for 30 minutes, and it's a documentary that we have made because, as we all know, the Eucharist is possibly the least understood element of our faith, and yet it is central to our faith. So few really believe that Jesus is present in the Eucharist. Often the way most people understand the Eucharist is that Jesus is symbolic. And to try and overcome this problem that seems to have been well set into our understanding of the Eucharist, Mike Willesee and I suppose, inspired by the work of the Eucharistic miracles that we have been working on, conscious of the problem that exists in the Church about the Eucharist, decide to use our energies and our abilities to make a film that would touch people in the real way about the Eucharist. It's actually designed for all ages. It's designed so that children receiving their first Holy Communion could better appreciate the Eucharist, and also for Catholics of many years of understanding, of many years of being a Catholic, who don't have a full understanding of the Eucharist. The film has been made in a number of languages. It actually has been, it's actually played on EWTN each year on the Feast of Corpus Christi, and that's happened for a number of years now. I think the film's been made probably about 8 years. We have presented it in a number of countries. When we presented the film in Poland, a Polish bishop walked out afterwards and made a statement, "This film should be next to the Bible in every home." Now, we couldn't have had a better publicity man than that one about this film, but it really touched him, and when you see it, you can see the reasons why someone would have that attitude. When we first made the film, Mike Willesee and I travelled to a number of states in Australia, and we presented it. And we had meetings like this, and we would start the meeting with a brief introduction that would show the film, and then we'd have questions afterwards. And when we showed the film in Adelaide, probably I think it was about 2002, we showed the film, we then called for questions, and there was a gentleman sitting at the back of the room, and he had a white cane, and he tapped his way up to the microphone, and he says, "Look, I haven't got a question, I just want to make a statement." He says, "I'm blind, but I came here, I thought, well, at least I can listen to the film." But then he said, "I thought this film's going to be special, so I said this prayer: Jesus, I know this film is going to be special, please let me see it." And he said, when the opening credits started, his vision was restored. He saw the film in perfect clarity until the closing credits, and then went back to being blind. And he said, "I don't know whether it would have been better for me to have had my sight restored for the rest of my life than to have had just that half an hour to see that film." And it's interesting because it's very hard to know whether someone actually saw the film, they can say that. But for me there was one very telling sign. He said to me, you know what was really impressive about this film? He says, that scene where there's this young girl receiving communion on the tongue. He says that was so in focus, so sharp, so beautiful. And it was receiving communion on the tongue. It was almost like God was saying, this is the way I want communion received. And how I know he saw that he must have seen that film is because in the making of this film, you'll see some very poor photography in there because some of it I actually did, but there was one particular shot that I did that was superb, and it was at the time we were filming some young children receiving Holy Communion. In fact, we'd actually orchestrated it so the priest would give them communion on the tongue because we thought this would be the most reverent way of displaying receipt of communion. So I'd actually organised it to be able to stand behind the priest while we was filming. And as this young girl, beautifully dressed in white, with a little flower crown, with a beautiful face, and with this unbelievable face of expectation and pleasure as she received the communion, I was looking through my viewfinder and I said, this is the most perfect shot I've ever filmed. It is perfect. And it took a blind man to notice it. The film must have been seen by, I suppose, hundreds of thousands of people. No one's ever identified that shot, and yet the blind man did. So I know he saw the film. So I'd like to sit back now and enjoy the film. I hope it touches you in many ways, and I also hope that it moves you to be able to share it with others so they may also be touched by it as well.
These children are about to receive their first Holy Communion in the Catholic Church. It's a big day in their young lives. They believe in God, they believe in His Son, Jesus. They believe simply because that is what they've been taught. But when they grow older and question, what then will they believe? They will require faith to believe in God, but that is not a difficult concept. When we look around us and ponder the magnitude and beauty and order of the world and the vast universe which surrounds us, we can choose to see and admire the power and benevolence of a mastermind of creation. And the children will find that history supports the story. They have been told of the existence of Jesus. There was once a man, a tall and strong man, who went through the towns and cities, teaching things never heard before. That man attracted people, and everyone who heard him was astounded. He gave advice, spoke about his Father, and called brothers all those who listened to him. He performed miracles. He healed the sick. He raised the dead. He walked on water. But one day, some men who were envious of him swore to kill him. They were mean individuals who were afraid to lose their own prestige, the untrustworthy, who feared his word because his speech was direct. So they had him arrested and crucified between two thieves. He died forgiving his executioners. That, in the most simple terms, is the story of Jesus Christ, and it is true. But what of that mystifying teaching that the communion host, having been consecrated in the Mass, is now truly the flesh of Christ, and that the wine in the miracle of the Eucharist is now truly the blood of Christ? In fact, the teaching of the Church goes even further, that in the Eucharist is the living presence of Jesus Christ, just as real and just as alive as he was on earth more than 2,000 years ago. Yes, Jesus Christ, truly there, flesh, blood, soul, and divinity. Can that really be the truth? And if it is the truth, why do we not see Catholics eager to approach the altar in greater numbers at every opportunity to receive communion and be embraced by Jesus, the Son of God? Let us look for the answers through the eyes of Jesus. Scripture foretold the coming of Jesus. The Gospels, written by his followers, make it clear he came to earth to save us. It was written, he has saved others, and he cannot save himself. If he is king, let him come down from the cross.
I did not come down from the cross, because I had not come to save myself, but rather I came to save you.
The Gospels also make it clear that while Jesus became man and died so that sins may be forgiven, the gates of heaven do not open automatically. We must go before him clean of sin and with our hands full of what we have done for him on earth.
If you do not look to heaven, you shall live as beings deprived of motive. The highest goal of your life is union with me in heaven.
It is difficult to believe that a God who stands in need of no one should take human flesh and die for the love of men who are his creatures. It was the enormous gift of a loving God. It was the ultimate sacrifice. Remember, in olden times, to win favour with your God, even a pagan god, it was the tradition to sacrifice an animal and then eat it. There are ancient cultures still existing who practice the same tradition. So when Jesus gave us the gift of the Eucharist at the Last Supper, it was consistent with that tradition. The great difference being that he is the victim sacrificed, and he invites us to participate in his great sacrifice by eating his flesh and drinking his blood. That was a concept that was to trouble many from the days of Jesus right through to today, and Jesus knew that it would. Well before the Last Supper, at the town of Capharnaum, Jesus made the almost unbelievable promise that he would give his own flesh and blood to be the food for our souls. He prepared his audience well. On the day before, he performed the miracle of the loaves and fishes. 5 loaves and 2 fish fed thousands. Of all his miracles on earth, never were so many people so directly involved. On the night before, he walked on water. They should have been ready to believe in him.
I am the living bread that has come down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, they shall live forever, and the bread that I will give is my flesh, for the life of the world. Unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you shall not have life in you.
That was almost 1 year before the Last Supper. But even then, Jesus knew that doubts about the reality of the sacramental gift of his body and blood would persist in the centuries to come. And so it would be that Jesus would intervene miraculously to endorse the truth of this sacrament. Here in Lanciano in Italy, in the 8th century, a priest who had doubts found that at the moment of consecration, the bread turned to flesh and the wine turned to blood. He immediately stopped the Mass, and that Mass never ended. That flesh and blood exists here today and has been on display for 1200 years. It has not been artificially preserved, it has not deteriorated. For that alone, science has no answer. In 1970, Italian professor Edoardo Linoli, an expert in pathology, carried out the official examination of the relics. He found that it was human flesh and blood.
La carne come un frammento di carne e venne fuori che era miocardio. Quello è sicuramente miocardio, è una struttura tipica del miocardio.
Asked his personal reaction,
Per qualche mese mi sembrava di camminare 30 centimetri più alto per strada, poi scesi giù.
in giving the Church's imprimatur to Linoli's report, Archbishop Enzio D'Antonio said that science had given a certain, thorough response to the authenticity of the Eucharistic miracle of Lanciano. We are reminded again, 500 years later, of the truth of his living presence with another Eucharistic miracle. And every year, on the Feast of Corpus Christi, the people of Orvieto in Italy celebrate this miracle in procession. In the 13th century, another priest had doubts as he was consecrating the host. It began to bleed over his hands and onto the altar cloth. The people marched to the nearby town of Orvieto, where the current pope was in residence, displaying the blood-stained cloth. The pope instituted the great feast of Corpus Christi, the body and blood of Christ. And that same blood-stained linen cloth is solemnly paraded to this day. Even now, at the start of the new millennium, another case is being examined. In South America in 1996, a priest found an abandoned communion host in his church after the Mass. He placed the host in water. Within days, a blood-like substance emerged and grew in quantity over some weeks. In 1999, permission was given by the Archdiocese for the substance to be scientifically examined. So far, it has been found to contain human DNA and to have evidence of flesh and blood. A sample was examined by noted forensic pathologist Dr. Robert Lawrence of the United States.
Mixed in it are these white cells, these little dots that you see. If this material had been placed directly into water after it was taken off a body, I would expect these cells to be dissolved.
If you put cells in water under such conditions,
They would be expected to dissolve.
how long?
A few minutes to an hour or two at the most. So they were active, living white cells at the time they were collected.
This South American sample is the subject of further scientific analysis. So Jesus always knew this gift would be a test of faith for many. Let's now go back to where it started, the most important meal in history, the Last Supper. It was the feast of the Jewish Passover. Jesus and his apostles prepared it well, Jesus sending two of his favourites, Peter and John, to the synagogue to obtain a sacrificed lamb which would be eaten that night. Only Jesus knew what lay ahead of him that night and the following day. But his apostles must have known that this night was different from any other. Jesus told them that one of the 12 would betray him. Even Peter was told that he would deny Jesus 3 times before dawn. Remember that while Jesus was fully man in his time, he was also the Son of God in union with his Father and the Holy Spirit. So he knew what lay ahead of him that night and the following day, and as a man, he suffered fear and anxiety as we would. But he put us first in a noble act of strength and generosity which is surely unparalleled. He fulfilled the promise he had made at Capharnaum almost a year before. He gave us our inheritance. To his church and each member of it, he bequeathed not earthly wealth, but a legacy such as only God could make, the gift of his very own living self. His words could not have been more clear.
This is bread. I am going to change it into my body. This is wine. I am going to change it into my blood. This body is truly the body which shall be crucified. This blood is the very blood that shall be shed for the remission of sins.
This was the institution of the Holy Eucharist.
As often as you eat this flesh and drink this cup, you do so in memory of me.
What Jesus was giving us was the supreme offering on earth which would glorify God in all his majesty. It was designed as the first devotion and the essence of Christian practice.
The most excellent way of coming to me is through Holy Communion. As men receive communion, they get to know me more intimately and listen from the depths of their hearts to my supreme teachings. There are no words to describe the privilege I grant you in Holy Communion.
As the concept of the reality of his flesh and blood proves difficult to many, so too does the concept of the living Jesus actually being present.
Today as yesterday, I am alive. I am true food and absolute consolation for men. In each host is the miracle and the mystery of my infinite love, the mercy of God towards his creature. Do not consider me like someone non-existent, or like a being who once existed, a hero of history, because I am who I am. I always live. I am always present, always active in the hearts of men.
Jesus also taught us the absolute importance of receiving the great gift of Holy Communion in a state of grace. He is offended as much as he was ever offended on earth when we do not approach this sacrament properly.
The desire that all souls will be clean when they receive me in the sacrament of love led me to wash the feet of my apostles. I also did it to represent the sacrament of penance.
Do we not profane his divinity when we see the host as a mere symbol of Christ's body and not the reality of his presence? In the same way, the Mass is not only a reminder of the sacrifice of Calvary, the Mass makes present and active again that great sacrifice. The death of Jesus is more than a mere fact of history. It is an eternal sacrifice. Today and every day, mankind can offer God a gift that is worthy of God, the gift of God's own Son. The purpose of the Last Supper was not just to create the Holy Eucharist and give it to his apostles. More importantly, it was to give his apostles the authority and responsibility to pass down through the bishops and priests of his church the power to bring about this miracle. When you stop to think about it, this is an awesome power. The priest raises this small piece of bread in consecration. He makes it become our Saviour, the Creator of the universe, the one in whom lies all human hope and merits of salvation, the one who sustains all with his infinite power.
I did not leave you as orphans. I provided the means to be with me until the end of time.
To accomplish this great gift, Jesus left the table of the Last Supper and went to offer himself as the sacrificial lamb. He went to Gethsemane to pray. When we think about the passion and death of Jesus, many of us concentrate on the scourging, the crown of thorns, the carrying of the cross on Calvary, and the crucifixion. But it was at Gethsemane that Jesus experienced abandonment and saw far more than the suffering he would experience the next day. He saw the sins of the world to come.
Nobody really believes that I perspired blood that night at Gethsemane, and few believe that I suffered much more in those hours than in the crucifixion. It was more painful because it was clearly revealed to me that the sins of everyone were to be made mine, and that I should answer for each one. My passion, how mistakenly remote is he who believes he comprehends it, yet only thinks of the terrible sufferings of my body.
When they came for him that night, Jesus allowed himself to be taken. He allowed the mock trials. He allowed the scourging. He submitted himself to the pain and humiliation of the crown of thorns. When he was made to carry his cross on Calvary, he again submitted. He was struck often, and sometimes he was unable to stand. It was a brutal experience which, as God, he could have stopped at any moment. But as a man, he felt that pain, and again, he felt abandoned.
I stumble and fall time and time again. I look at both sides of the road, searching for a small look of love, of surrender, of union with my pain, but I do not see anyone.
Why did he have to suffer so much? St. Augustine says, everything he suffered was the price of our ransom. He wished to drink the chalice of his suffering to the dregs, so that we might learn the greatness of his love and the baseness of sin. Holy Mary, Mother of God, full of grace. Here was a woman whose greatness had been foretold at the very dawn of the creation of mankind. And here now was this same woman, Mary, standing at the foot of the cross as her son was dying in extreme agony. It was only the night before that Jesus had given us the great gift of his flesh and blood. But his flesh and blood was given to him by Mary, something that cannot be underestimated. And with his life on earth as man slipping away, Jesus gave us his final gift. By this time, the Apostle John also was beside the cross.
Woman, there is your son. Mother of mine, these are my brothers. Guard them, love them. They are not alone.
Jesus, in the clearest of terms, was giving his mother to us as our own, a mother to whom we could appeal for all our needs.
I united all of you with the tightest bonds when I gave you my own mother. Under God, she is the most feared enemy of hell. She is a bridge between heaven and earth.
So these were the three inseparable gifts of Jesus to each one of us. His mother is now our mother. His flesh and blood is the food for our soul on this fleeting pilgrimage on earth in the Eucharist. And here is our God who became man to sacrifice himself to save us.
Everything, the heavens and the earth, and all that inhabit it, are mine. Only the love of my children is not mine, and that's what I search for.
He has given his gifts. It is now for man to open his heart to receive them.
That is absolutely amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. I suppose the question in my mind is, where to from here?
Well, first question is there any questions? That'll be my first question. But I think most of you who've seen that film would say it is really great. At least it tells us something beautiful about the Eucharist, something that we want to share with others about it. And if any of you feel that way and would like to get a copy of it, you'll have to find out from the organisers our email address. Unfortunately, we came very unprepared. There should have been copies of that here available to you. But we're not very far away. If anyone would like them, they can speak to the organisers and we can make some arrangement for them to be sent over from Australia to New Zealand, and you can get them from the organisers. But many of you may, I'll anticipate some of the questions, and that is, well, how can we get school children at least to see this film? How can we do something about encouraging our young people to understand more about the Eucharist? And I think the people who are on parish councils, people who are involved with the school students organisation, maybe should have evenings to see it, or during religious education classes they should see it. But we've done our bit to be able to produce something that you can use. You've got to use inventive minds to try and solve this problem that the Church has. I talked about it yesterday. If Catholics really believed what we've shown you here, that Jesus is present, everyone would go to Mass, not just 10%. But it's the duty of that 10% to help the priests in that work of evangelisation. And so you can do your bit, you can encourage others to see it and to understand the central element of their faith, which is the Eucharist, which we've tried to do in this program. Well, that's the answer to the question, but I think what comes next. Now, Philip, what would you like me to do now?
I'm not quite sure what we do now, Ron, because we're reasonably close to starting the link, but we've got about 5 or 7 minutes, if you can take the odd.
Okay.
Is there a question that we could fairly ask Ron to cope with in a fairly short time, do you think? They're very shy.
Oh, they're thinking.
Yeah. Repeat the website?
Okay. Well,
I've got your business card in my
yeah.
pocket.
If you're in doubt, go to reasontobelieve.com.au, and if there's a comment section there, just stick a comment there like, I'd like to get this or that. That'll be one link. So reasontobelieve.com.au, and it's all one word, so you can remember that. You can also get the book that wasn't available yesterday, my book, on that site, and some of the other things, the Signs from God story on video. It's not the actual program that went to air, but it's an edited version of that we've made. It's on that site as well. Now, any other questions? Yeah.
There was a gentleman, a Spanish-speaking gentleman, who was relating some writings, I take it. Where did those writings come from?
Can I ask you a question? Did you like the words? They're great, aren't they? Well, I'll tell you a secret. We don't tell everyone this, but seeing your friends. Do you remember yesterday we talked about the signs from God and the person who took down dictation from Jesus? we stole those words from Jesus' words to her. And we just could not find better words. And in fact, when we made this program, we gave the script to the Archdiocese of Sydney's main, what do they call them, who's in charge of etiquette, and I've forgotten the technical term for that person, who gives the imprimatur for things. And we didn't tell him anything about it other than just gave him the script to check. He went over and he says, there's no mistake at all. Or there's one word, synagogue, which should not have been used. We realised that afterwards. But apart from that, no theological errors in the whole script. And then he said to us, where did you get those words from? He says, because they were magic, and that's how we felt about them. And so, yeah, that's where they've come from. Not all of them. Some of them are from the Gospels and elsewhere. But there were some key ones, really touching ones. You know, particularly that line during the way of the cross. You know, I stumble and fall time and time again. I look on either side of the road, searching for a look of love. I couldn't write that stuff. I mean, I couldn't write that poetry like that. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. Well, there we go. I think we've solved the problem. Thank you very much, and I'm really pleased to have had the opportunity to come and see you. Thank you.